If you can't make this conversion, you have a deficiency. It's this deficiency that leads to the most common ailments that we suffer from. So that process is called methylation, and there's several genes that govern it.
So this is a reaction video I'm doing for Joe Rogan's incredible, great interview of an equally amazing Gary Brecka. I've had probably 50 or 60 emails from patients or fans asking me to do this reaction video. I've had a number of patients, I think I had 5 yesterday, call saying they were being poisoned by folic acid. How could they get it out of their system? Probably 20 last week. It shocked me. So I had to dig into this and realize what had happened and what Mr. Brecka had said. And I'm glad he said all that. It gets this conversation moved to the center stage here in America, especially with Joe Rogan. A lot of you know me. A lot of people know me or know who I am or have heard about me. I've been dealing with MTHFR and genetic SNPs and problems for 15 plus years. My book on this subject, The 85% Solution, was #1 for 2 years on Amazon. It was about the problem with MTHFR in Utah. Utah is considered the Prozac capital of the world, but the reality is it's the MTHFR capital of America because after random testing 4,000 people for genetic SNPs and for vitamin panels and things like that, we were able to conclude that 85% of the people we tested here in Utah had some methylation problem, probably MTHFR. The vast majority have MTHFR. I've tested tens of thousands of people using intracellular vitamin testing, genetic testing. I've looked at probably 20, maybe I'd say 15 to 18,000 NutriHacker completes or NutriHacker imputed. That's what I prefer nowadays. You get a 23andMe or they've been hacked. So now on Ancestry.com, and you can run it through NutriHacker Complete for $37. It's a compiler, and it comes out with the data I need to make decisions about what your deficiencies are and stuff. More importantly, though, that's reflected in intracellular vitamin testing.
This gene is estimated to be compromised in somewhere between 40 and 60%, depending on the study. 40 to 60% of the population has this gene mutation. And what this gene mutation does is it interrupts the ability to convert folic acid into the usable form called methylfolate. And while that might not sound like a big deal until you realize that folic acid is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet.
Folic acid is interesting. Gary is right. It's everywhere. Mr. Brecka is right. It's in all kinds of flours and wheat and products now because everything's enriched, and he was completely correct about that. He also said something that a lot of you may have missed. He said 44% of people can't handle it. I don't know if that's an exact statistic, but I know what he's talking about. There's a folate receptor. There's 3 folate receptors, Folar 1, Folar 2, and Folar 3. So 3 forms of folate receptors are formed by these genetic blueprints. So Folar 1, Folar 2, Folar 3 are genetic blueprints for folate receptors. There's folate receptor type 1, which is natural folates, methylfolates, stuff like that. There's folate receptor type 2, which is for folic acid. So, and you can Google that, search on it. We'll put some images up so you get an idea that I'm not just blathering on about this. Science Direct did a good article about this a few years ago. Folar 2 is how you absorb folic acid. Folar 3 is for several other forms of folate that are more rare. So there's a lot of different forms of folate out there. But if you have Folar 2 receptors and they're formed by this blueprint and your genetics are good on it, and I'll show you an image where someone has no SNPs, then you're fine to absorb folic acid. If you have only one SNP, you're heterozygous for Folar 2, then you can still absorb 60% of the folic acid that's presented to you. If you're homozygous on it, you have no folate 2 receptors. You have no folic acid receptors. And I think that was the 44%, but I don't believe that statistic is completely correct. I think it's a lot lower. That's neither here nor there. So we have a accessory pathway to convert folic acid to folate or methylfolate. Well, we add methyl groups to it in the process and it becomes methylfolate, and then we run it through the system. And he kind of discusses that, skips over it a little. People didn't catch that part because everyone's really confused about it.
Because when you put this raw material into the human body, if you can't metabolize it, if you can't methylate it into the usable form, first of all, you now have a deficiency in the form your body needs and an excess in the nutrient you can't process. And this causes things to go haywire. So your body tries to convert folic acid eventually into something called methylfolate. Essentially, folic acid and folate gets converted into the usable form called methylfolate. Okay, now this is one of the most commonly utilized methylated nutrients in the human body.
So most people can absorb folic acid fine and utilize it. I overmethylate really quickly and easily with any methyl groups. So I take folic acid and I keep my folate level up with that. When you get a blood level of folate or folic acid blood level, it's not telling you which form of folate it's testing. The doctor who ordered it doesn't know which form of folate it's testing. The lab people don't know which form of folate it's testing. I don't know which form of folate it's testing. And there's some forms you can't absorb. There's some forms you can. So that test is worthless. It's the intracellular testing that we do that tells you what's going on with your folate and folic acid levels and stuff. Also, B12 is the same way. You can have a high serum B12 level, but your intracellular level can be low because you're taking the wrong kind of B12. You're either taking a methyl B12, a cyano B12, an adenosyl cobalamin or hydroxycobalamin. There's 4 or 5 forms of B12 or cobalamin out there too. So that serum test tells you very, very little, if anything. Mr. Brecka also talks about the 5 SNPs, methylation SNPs, really, that they test for. We test for dozens of them. I look at all of them. I can't get by with just looking at 5. And I realize those 5 he picked are kind of critical. It's also in a set test from a specific company that I know he uses. Thank you for doing the work. You've got in there, but there's a lot more you can test for, and it needs to be tested for. And I like to look at all the methylation SNPs to get an idea of what's going on with this patient. And there's a lot of them. Methylation problems are easy to divide up into what they do. Methylation problems are usually you can't methylate properly, so you can't protect your DNA from mutations or changes. Methylation protects your DNA from changes and mutations that can kill you or cause cancer.
You know, we pull crude oil out of the ground, right? Mm-hmm. But you can't put crude oil into your gas tank, right? Because the car doesn't understand that fuel source. So what happens is crude oil has to be refined into gasoline.
Mr. Brecka, this comment about crude oil is really interesting. Oil out of the ground and converting it to unleaded gasoline so you can run in your engine appropriately and give you enough energy. Thank you for quoting my best-selling book on the subject, The 85% Solution. As an MD, I've been kind of forced or coerced into figuring out what diseases or symptoms or problems occur from these various intracellular vitamin deficiencies I test for. Like I see severe B1 deficiencies a lot, and it's not from alcoholism. These people swear they don't even drink. It's just a B1 deficiency, probably more from a genetic problem they have, and various genetic steps cause these intracellular vitamin deficiencies. B1 or thiamine, when it's really severely depleted or deficient, can cause Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Wernicke syndrome comes first, and it's more neurological. A bunch of weird neurological neuropathy areas occur, neuropathic areas occur. They become kind of goofy and start forgetting things. That then eventually goes into Korsakoff syndrome, which is not reversible. Wernicke syndrome is. Korsakoff syndrome is bad dementia caused by B1 deficiency. So Korsakoff syndrome is a bad dementia or Alzheimer's disease caused by a severe B1 deficiency that's been going on a long time, and it's not readily reversible or reversible at all. When I find severe B1 deficiencies, and I've had 5 Wernicke syndromes in the last year, you have to recognize them for what they are. Just like severe vitamin C deficiency, I've had 4 scurvy cases in the last 7 or 8 years. Bleeding gums, sores in their mouth, pain all over because it affects their connective tissue, and it's really uncomfortable. And they've been to multiple doctors, endodontists, oral surgeons, periodontists, all kinds of people, infectious disease experts. No one can find anything, and it's a vitamin C deficiency, and that's proven on intracellular testing. I've also seen pellagra. I've seen other cases of all kinds of weird symptoms and deficiencies are due to the deficiencies of these vitamins over the years. So nothing surprises me anymore. I also get iron deficiencies that are pernicious that they can't fix. Well, if you have a B1, a B2, a B3, or B12 deficiency or vitamin C deficiency, you won't absorb iron at a cellular level. And so they keep treating these people with lots of iron, giving them iron IVs, whole blood transfusions, all that to no avail. When in reality, a B complex and a good vitamin C vitamin would probably fix the problem, and they would then absorb the iron. So try that if you've got a pernicious anemia and you can't seem to get rid of it. Also, Mr. Brecka, you're talking about homocysteine causing vascular inflammation. Thank you.
But if you have an impaired ability to break homocysteine down, right, to take that amino acid, homocysteine, and convert it into a harmless amino acid called methionine, if you can't make this conversion, homocysteine rises. It causes something called hyperhomocysteinemia, high homocysteine in the blood. When homocysteine rises, it becomes one of the more inflammatory compounds in the human body. As it's cruising by the inside lining of the artery, it starts to irritate the artery. It actually reduces the artery's elasticity and can even cause it to constrict. The high levels of homocysteine are causing vascular narrowing. I mean, this is a fixed system, right? So if I make the pipes smaller in a fixed system, pressure goes up.
I've seen so many young people, young adults with strokes or heart attacks from high homocysteine levels. It doesn't just cause high blood pressure, you pointed out. It can kill you. When I was over all the nursing homes here in Utah, working with the state, we had beds full of women who had strokes at a young age while they're pregnant or while they're on birth control pills or while they're just living life. And these are women in their 20s and 30s who had bad MTHFR situations, all had high homocysteine levels when I checked them, and no one had ever figured that out. It is a major problem. Back to Utah being the MTHFR capital of the U.S., because I have all these blonde-haired, blue-eyed people here descended from Norway and all have significant MTHFR, homozygous C677T, homozygous A1298C, compound heterozygous. So I've seen people with 3 MTHFR genetics, meaning 2 C677Ts and 1 A1298C. You can have up to 4. I haven't seen that yet, but I've seen several with 3 of them, and they're just shut down. If you have a high level of homocysteine, you could also have a problem with your transulfuration pathway. Transulfuration pathway issues are really critical to figure out. If you're born with either of the 2 CBS homozygosities or CSE homozygosity, your transulfuration pathways never worked. And that's how you literally take homocysteine, which is horrible and cardiovascularly inflammatory, and you transform it into glutathione. And if you have a B6 or a serine deficiency or a NAC deficiency, cysteine deficiency, you can't also take homocysteine through that pathway to form glutathione. So you'll have massive inflammation, no way to offset it. If you have a B6, which is pyridoxine, or a serine or a cysteine deficiency, those are easily treatable. Someone's got to diagnose them, though, and you're looking for intracellular problems, not serum problems. So they need to do this form of testing. But if you can't detox, if your glutathione level's low and you happen to have a high homocysteine level, you probably have a transulfuration pathway problem. If you are homozygous for CBS, either CBS or CSC, there's 2 CBSs and 1 CSC, your transulfuration pathway doesn't function at all, and it cannot be made to function. So you'll always have high homocysteine levels and always have low glutathione levels. If you go to PubMed and look at homocysteine, inflammation, and glutathione, you'll see 2,053 articles. Well, it was as of yesterday when I looked at it, 2,053 articles on that. Glutathione offsets the inflammation caused by the homocysteine. It's your only natural option to bring down your inflammation from the homocysteine. You can't bring down your homocysteine level if you have a transulfuration genetic problem. So go to Google Images, search for transulfuration pathway. There's one with a pink blob in the middle of it, the image there. That's the one you want to look at. We'll post it so you can look at it. If you're missing B6, serine, or cysteine, or you have a CBS homozygosity or CSC, that won't work. That pathway is dead until you either give it the vitamins or you give it lots of glutathione. It's one of the reasons we developed our glutathione. There's 70 on Amazon. I don't know any of them that have been validated. I mean, except for ours. We're the only one. Our patented glutathione process we put it through and put all our glutathione products through is unique and proper for handling glutathione, so it works. We have the only validated one, oral one on the planet, by the way. You need to use it. That's how you offset the high homocysteine level. You can also use a statin, but to my knowledge, I don't think a statin cools off the arteries well enough when you have a high homocysteine level. God gave you glutathione to do the job, and that's about the only option.
If you look at the link between that simple gene mutation, MTHFR, its incidence in stroke, cardiovascular disease, its incidence in ADD and ADHD and OCD, you'll find not a direct causal link, but enough of a prevalence to say, why wouldn't we just take folic acid out of the diet, add methylfolate, and take a shot at correcting the course of these conditions?
I might disagree with what Mr. Brecka blames on folic acid intake. I see ADHD and other disorders as more of a vitamin deficiency problem, not a oversupply of folic acid. But he says potato, I say potato, so who's right? But I've helped so many people with ADHD, and you deal with their MTHFR status correctly, give them a good baseline support product. And there's several out there on the market, not just ours, though we think ours is the best, but you can help that ADHD.
So your body tries to convert folic acid eventually into something called methylfolate.
Mr. Brecka pointed out that there is a conversion process from folic acid to methylfolate. Good job. I mean, you're spot on in so many things. But I argue that's the sugar intake and daily massive electronic stimulation, all the stimulation these little kids are getting that causes their ADHD more than some excess folic acid. Because again, most of those kids have the capability to absorb the folic acid through their Folic 2 receptors, handle it fine. So in that accessory pathway that you just discussed.
And essentially linking an amino acid in the bloodstream called homocysteine to hypertension. And the reason for this is you got homocysteine in your blood. I've got it in my blood. Everybody listening to this podcast has homocysteine.
Great discussion of homocysteine causing cardiovascular and hypertension problems, but you left out any discussion regarding the ACE homozygosity. There's other genetic reasons why you have high blood pressure. It's just not MTHFR causing high homocysteine. I have an ACE problem. Usually around 50, your blood pressure goes up, and there's no way to bring it down. When you have an ACE homozygosity, it's really hard to flip that back out, and can't do it. I mean, there's just no way to do it. That genetics is set in stone. There's not a good workaround. You just got to lower your blood pressure however you can. And you just can't turn it off.
If you look at 5 particular genes, MTHFR, MTRR, MTR, AHCY, and COMT, dude, if you find that you have one of those gene mutations and you supplement for their deficiency, magic things will happen in your body.
You've really oversimplified this. What if you, for example, you have a PEMT homozygosity? Oddly, that's considered a methylation SNP, which you're not testing, by the way, from what I can tell. It causes a plethora of nasty problems: obesity, type 2 diabetes, gallbladder disease, and the worst of all, those are all 3 pretty bad. The worst of all is it causes fatty liver disease that becomes NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that then inevitably becomes NASH, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, and then that becomes just full-blown scarring hepatitis of your liver that kills your liver. You're either going to end up in liver failure or liver cancer, and it's really hard to treat it once it gets that far. But if you know you have that genetic SNP, you take phosphatidylcholine and unwinds almost all that. Use the VARS glutathione. It needs glutathione to help clean out the liver, heal the scarring, prevent the scarring, because your liver's been trashed by that, having that genetic SNP, PEMT. I've done several videos on it lately. It freaks me out, and I find patients right and left with it. They have a lot of medical problems. They all think their liver doesn't work right. They're right. No doctors have listened to them. They're told, oh, you have a little NAFLD. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, yeah, you can take phosphatidylcholine, reach out and contact my office, and I'll give you the version I take. I'm a carrier. Even that can cause gallbladder disease and NAFLD and type 2 diabetes, even if you're just heterozygous for it. But homozygous, you're really in trouble. So the earlier you find that out and get on phosphatidylcholine, the safer you are. See this NuTracker page here where it shows a homozygosity for PEMT. You don't want that. Remember, if you have a transulfuration problem, it'll raise homocysteine levels. And if this is due to CBS homozygosity, there's just no way to bring it down. You may want to get the Pro7 test if you want to find out pretty quick. That's another test I designed for GX Sciences. It's called the Pro7, and it shows CBS in there. And if you're homozygous CBS, all you patients of mine who've heard this, and I didn't quite realize what was going on with that over the years. I mean, I've not been perfect. I'm still evolving and learning more. You need to get on lots of glutathione, but it's going to cause a toxicity problem out the wazoo if you don't get on appropriate functional glutathione like our virus glutathione. I'm not trying to sell you a product. I mean, I kind of am, but there's no other option on the marketplace. So if you notice in our copper balance, it helps you detox, helps your copper, zinc, and metallothionein and ceruloplasmin function more correctly. But it's got both serine and B6 in it, as does our MTHFR Renew and MTHFR Endure. We planned ahead for this. If you take those, you probably don't have a problem with your transulfuration pathway unless you have a CBS or CSC homozygosity.
So the number one thing is, let's start from the top because we've got a great list of stuff. Get rid of folic acid. Get that shit out of your diet.
Get rid of folic acid.
I find this statement kind of oddly blanketing. Folic acid isn't the only cause of anxiety. What about MAOA, MAOB, SNPs, SLC6A4, which causes problems with 5-HTP, which Joe Rogan and Gary Brecka discussed? I thought that was an interesting point. GAD1 or GAD2 errors I see a lot more commonly. You can't make enough GABA. GABA is this natural Valium you make in your brain that kind of relaxes you. A lot of people addicted to benzodiazepines are addicted because they can't make enough GABA. So GABA is not addicting. I mean, there's a really good brand I take because I have that anxiety problem. And it keeps me from jumping out of planes headed to Japan at 34,000 feet. I'll chew one or two of the GABAs I use. So if you're interested in that, email my office. We'll give you the link to the one I use. In ATG 1601, I'm right in the middle of three large universities here, BYU, University of Utah, and Utah Valley University. It's about 140,000, 150,000 students. And the parents come up, find out little Bobby's been put on Valium or Xanax for his anxiety, which are certainly good Band-Aid options, but not anything long-term. And then we usually find out they have an ATG 1601 anxiety problem. And you treat that. It's really weird how you treat that, but use a natural product that just gets rid of the anxiety. So, and that's something else that should be considered, not just folic acid overdose, which again, I've never really seen. Yeah, and I designed the Pro7 with GX Sciences, the one we use, to help look at anxiety and causes of anxiety and depression and some other big issues, and all the methylation SNPs and mitochondrial SNPs are on there too, the important ones. It's a really helpful test. You can get it through my office, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying we've designed some of these tests, and so I think I have a lot of credibility making comments about it.
And based on, there's 5 major genes of methylation. Based on how these 5 genes are working or not, you supplement for their deficiency. So, for example, one of the most common gene mutations in the world is called MTHFR.
Sorry, but there are a lot more than 5 genes, 5 SNPs out there that need to be looked at. I've already kind of gone over some of them. PEMT, CBS, GAD1, GAD2, ATG1601, SOD2, SOD3 errors, because we've done a lot of research on SOD. Look at our biotech, look at our Ceramax, the work we've done on that product, the FDA registration stuff we've got on that. It's crazy. So all those need to be looked at in completion. So that's why, like, if you want a speedy fast test, get one of the Pro7s or one of our foundation methylations. They're quick. If you want the really giant detailed tests that look at a lot of stuff, do the Ancestry.com and get the NutriHacker Complete. Go to nutrahacker.com. It's really spelled NutraHacker. You'll see it below me.com and get the Complete for $37. I want to see the imputed version of that. They usually send it an hour or two after the Complete. If you're going to use Ancestry.com, don't use your real name or date of birth.
If you look at 5 particular genes, MTHFR, MTRR, MTR, AHCY, and COMT.
Close and accurate, but you're missing genetic SNPs that I believe cause the vast majority of these intracellular deficiencies or vitamin deficiencies that you mentioned. There's a direct tie-in. I'm going to do a video about the talk I gave at IOMA 2022. I spoke about how this patient, his NutriHacker imputed, matched up almost completely with his vitamin deficiencies he had. And I go through it step by step. NutriHacker, they've known this for a long time, or thought they knew this. They just know that there's really good testing out there that kind of matches their genetic testing they do. So, or the compilation they give you. You got to look at genetic SNPs as a cause for these vitamin deficiencies. And these genetic SNPs in turn hurt you by causing these vitamin deficiencies. You kind of alluded to that, Gary, so it's a really good comment you made. Again, incredibly insightful. I'm just expounding on some of the stuff you put forth in this. Thanks for doing all this.
What's the amino acid called?
Trimethylglycine, TMG.
Is that
capital T, capital M?
Similar to regular glycine?
No, this is trimethylglycine. It's a little bit different than the amino acid glycine. Trimethylglycine will actually help to metabolize, to help give the body the raw material it needs.
You use TMG to bring down the homocysteine level. That might work in rare cases, but most of them require a lot more than that. It might require B6 or serine with the transulfuration pathway to bring down the homocysteine level, not just TMG. There's a lot of causes for high homocysteine level. I hope that helps and gets rid of some of the confusion. Patients are calling me going, well, he said use TMG. Well, TMG is in our baseline methylation or MTHFR support products we designed. It's already there, but other methyl donors are too. It doesn't just have to be TMG as a methyl donor. There can be other methyl donors that help it. But pyridoxine and I use P5P, by the way, the precursor to it, but pyridoxine, which is B6, or L-serine are the two best options to bring down your homocysteine if you know your genetics. But you got to dig into the genetic portion of that. Again, it could be a transulfuration pathway problem causing your homocysteine to be up. And you can't ever bring it down till you figure out that puzzle.
Dude, if you find that you have one of those gene mutations and you supplement for their deficiency, magic things will happen in your body.
Good job on this statement. This is good. The deficiencies needed to be treated to deal with these issues and these diseases and improve your health. You're so correct. Again, you're preaching to the choir with me. Thank you for saying that. You're awesome, Gary Brecka. But we used an FDA Health and Human Services approved vitamin panel, that intracellular vitamin panel that's incredibly accurate and really sensitive. And looks at over 100 different, looks at 100 different vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and antioxidants. And it's really helpful. So because of these genetic SNPs we're all born with. And on top of that, people ask, well, is this getting better? Well, no, there's no way it gets better. It just gets worse with every generation because they're kind of stacking up a little with each generation. I mean, I've got some people now showing horrible, massive amounts of really bad genetic SNPs with all kinds of diseases they have, and they've had kids and everything else, and not that they shouldn't, but there's going to have to be some fix for the SNPs out there. So each generation, I think they're getting worse, not better. That's kind of depressing, but we're also getting better at treating them, or some of us are. I'd say mainstream medicine, for the most part, hasn't figured any of this out, and they need to step in and figure this out. I don't know if they will.
How many pathological conditions or conditions that we call consequences of aging we are just accepting as consequences of aging, not realizing that they are nutrient deficiencies.
Part of the problem we found, sometimes there's no viable vitamin or supplement designed to meet that need, meaning like glutathione. I mean, anyone can take glutathione, but are you taking one that actually works? That can be absorbed, that's reduced, that's stable, that's utilizable and functional in your body? Probably not. And like Joe Rogan and Gary Brecka said, there's a lot of people out there just selling junk, just selling crap. So we spend a lot of money, time, effort, research, doing FDA and other level work, highest research work that can be done developing some of these products so they can be used. Like we have a new SOD2, SOD3 supplement coming out. It's pretty incredible. It's just going to be a encapsulated version, but we'll fill that void for people who have SOD2, SOD3 SNPs. It's on the last page of your NutriHacker imputed or complete. And some people have absolutely no SOD2 or 3 ever in their body. They never made it. So someone had to develop something that actually worked. SOD is the super antioxidant, superoxide dismutase. And if it's not handled correctly, it doesn't function.
Stroke, cardiovascular disease, its incidence in ADD and ADHD and OCD, you'll find not a direct causal link, but enough of a prevalence to say, why wouldn't we just take folic acid out of the diet, add methylfolate, and take a shot at correcting the course of these conditions?
Let me dig into this further. I've not read or seen these correlations that he just talked about, Gary Brecka just talked about. Those diseases or symptoms I've seen occur because of deficiencies of B12 and B9, which is folate or folic acid. But again, having those deficiencies is not due to excessive intake of folic acid. They don't block each other out. You can have folic acid and B9, B12 deficiency. And you may, if you don't have the receptors for, as I've discussed before, if you don't have the FOLR2 receptors, you won't absorb the folic acid. And so it's not causing toxicity or anxiety. It just needs to be extruded from the body. Eventually you'll pee it off, or you'll filter it out through your kidneys, or that's like trying to say artificial sweeteners will just push those glucose molecules off your insulin receptors. It just doesn't happen. There are serum tests for folate or folic acid, but as I said a while ago, they're almost worthless because it doesn't tell you what kind of folate or folic acid or B12 it's testing for, nor are there any symptoms from having a high B12 or folic acid or any of the other forms of B12 or folate. So there's just no symptoms that occur with that, to my knowledge. And though they test for it, I find it bothersome to deal with. And I usually say, we'll get rid of it, or go donate blood. You'll get rid of it that way if it worries you.
We partnered with Da Vinci Medical and Theralite 360 to make one of the most powerful red light beds on the market.
This is it. I don't hardly know anything about infrared beds, but it's good information. I listen carefully to that. Pretty cool stuff. I have patients who ask about it, but so thank you again for that, Gary Brecka. I know you had very limited bandwidth and time on this. I had to be really concise about what you're saying. I get that. I've spoken enough to know that myself, and it's hard to get everything out there. So please forgive me if I stepped on your toes and said stuff that you already knew and you guys were doing. I just wanted to clarify because I've gotten so many questions and it's raised so many issues. And you know all that. You're dealing with the same thing that you're in. So thank you very much for helping Joe Rogan, helping his friend. And the world thanks you for kind of bringing this out. And I really thank you for bringing this out. Thanks everyone for watching this. This is Dr. Dan Purser. Take care and go in good health.